Hello, and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaksan. I am a core alignment coach and a diversity educator. If you're interested in seeing what I train individuals and organizations in, you can go to my website, which is knowwhatyouwantcoaching.wordpress.com. I'm really excited about our show tonight, even the title I love, which is always designed by the guest. The title is We Will Save Us: Resilient Communities, the Antidote to Fear, Isolation, and Fascism. And my guest is Deema Tamini. Deema, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I would love to share with people your background, and because I don't like skipping a word, I'm going to read it.
Okay.
And if you want, you can slow me down or stop me and talk about a piece before I continue the whole thing if you want, or we can just hear the whole introduction
Okay. Let's go
because I
for
want
it.
people to know. Um, okay, so Deema Tamini is a community organizer, a nonprofit and startup founder, and marketing and technology professional. And tonight she's going to talk about the inspiration for the phrase "We will save us" and how it's rooted in mutual aid and solidarity, and a nod to "We will not cancel us." She'll touch on finding courage as an individual and as a collective, how to handle attacks on your character, her experience and journey, collective liberation as a grounding anchor, as well as some of the activities she's been involved in to help educate people, and the power of education through film, events, and media to follow. And I must say, I'm one of the people who has been educated by so many things that you have organized. I'm so grateful.
Oh,
Deema currently serves on the City of Davis Human Relations Commission, where she is deeply involved in local initiatives focused on immigrant solidarity, community safety, and strengthening the trust between the city and marginalized communities. Such important work. Her work includes helping organize public forums, engaging with community organizations, and supporting efforts that center lived experience, care, mutual aid, and accountability. Deema brings a background in marketing, technology, and storytelling to her civic and political work, using those skills to help communities communicate, organize, and build momentum. This is all true.
a lot,
She had,
though.
I'm just going to add one more little bit. She has more recently applied her skills to the Palestinian and collective liberation movements, is a member of Yolo for Palestinian Justice, and a volunteer for the Global Sumud Flotilla. Across everything she does, she is guided by a commitment to social justice and collective liberation, and by the belief that art, food, creativity, and joy are powerful tools for connection and change. And you live in Davis with your husband and kids, and
I do.
happiest when cooking, making things, and building community around the table.
So true.
Anything you want to add?
Ooh, that's a lot. No, I feel like that covers a lot. Yeah, I'm always glad that you can include food in these heavier topics, but food is also political. So, yeah, I think you covered it beautifully. Thank you for introducing me.
You're welcome, and thank you for being willing to be able to at least touch on this array of subjects and topics, because you've experienced so much and you've been so honest and publicly willing to share vulnerability and lived experience. And so many of us are not just learning from you, but are validated by your presence and
Mm.
how you are building trust um, for marginalized community members and others. I'm glad. We'll make sure we go to the joy part, and
Yes.
we'll return to joy whenever you want to this conversation, but also at the end, because it's so important to remember to celebrate. And joy, I agree, is a form of resistance. Um,
Yes, very much so.
But
And
I'm curious. Go ahead.
it's just lovely to hear you say that anything I've done is validating, because I think that's super important these days. I think people need to feel like what they're experiencing is not, that they're not alone in it. So that's maybe one of the most touching things to hear as somebody who's doing this work, is that it's validating other people's feelings and lived experiences. And I think that often also gives people courage to also speak their truth. So
Definitely, definitely does. I wanted to know. I'll just tell you one way we could start this conversation, and then make sure it's where you want to start. I'm just wondering, because I've seen I've seen you give like a speech at No King at a no the last No Kings March, which was incredibly powerful. I've seen you and others on the Human Relations Commission in Davis, and I've seen and sometimes experienced how hard this work is. And I wonder if you want to just sort of start there, and then um, and I think it's important also the part about like how to cope with being attacked, because I know that's part of the work.
yeah.
Attacks on your character.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the hardest parts, really. And I think it sometimes is what keeps people from doing the work or being able to say what their experience is, because they find that in doing so, they might come under attack. And, I think I spent a large amount of my life allowing that to have power over me, and keep me quiet because I didn't want to deal with that, because it's real. And I
Mhm.
don't expect everyone to want to deal with it. And then, so I never have judgment toward people who choose not to um, take that on. It's I think it's good to name it as unfair and unjust, those kinds of attacks and behavior, and they're very much a strategy to keep you scared and silent. And I think what's interesting is we're seeing that now, not just toward people that are speaking up for Palestine or speaking up for Arabs or speaking up for Muslims. I think we're seeing that now so much more across the country around lots of topics. If you're speaking up for immigrant rights, so there's just, and I mean, there's all of these things are connected, and so more and more people are feeling this fear of speaking up. I think for me, what I learned, my personal experience with that, having that fear of being attacked, was it was actually far more detrimental to me, from a mental health perspective, which
Mhm.
actually ended up being sort of like physical health perspective,
Mhm.
because our brains are very connected to our bodies. And
Mhm.
it took a bit of a leap, to decide to just be open about how about my experiences. And I've always been doing social justice work in some way or another.
Mhm.
Um, but on the topic in particular of Palestine, that work is the work that is just so most likely to get attacked. And it was the thing that I kind of didn't touch on, even though I worked in like social justice spaces, and I was doing work for lots of different groups of marginalized communities. But I was careful not to go there because I knew how this country and our media has trained people to react to that, and created an atmosphere that's silencing and that erases our identity. So I feared that a lot. But when I took that leap and decided I couldn't be silent anymore, it was really fascinating to me how much more healthy I actually became.
Mm.
Um, and how many people, whether they could speak out openly or not, came to me and said, "Thank you. You know, thank you for saying these words that just need to be said." And so I took this very fearful step, which resulted in actually really beautiful, beautiful things. Um, Community built around me that was not community that was like at an arm's distance or didn't truly know exactly who I was. It was community that was like, we know who you are, and we embrace that, and we embrace that you're saying the things that we wish more people would say. So it was actually very liberating to be able to speak my mind and find that there was a lot of community there, and many people who still can't speak out for many reasons. They don't want to lose their jobs.
Mhm.
They are still afraid of what will come if they speak out. Um, and so, but for me personally, I found a lot of great things on the other side of my fear. Now, what came along with that was also some not great things, which was, being my having my character attacked publicly, um, having people trying to find, negative things about me, and how I ended up. I mean, I was, horrified by it at first, and I was like super sad because I'm a very like loving and caring person, and it just felt
Mhm.
like a lot to have these things said about me, when they're sort of opposite of how I feel about the world. And so that was really hard, but I think this concept of collective liberation, which I speak about a lot, which is essentially the idea that really none of us are free unless all of us are free. And just being super grounded in that like all of us need to be free. There's no way in this world that we can be free if there's a group of people that we continue to allow to be oppressed. And so that means everyone's free. And how can that be bad, right? And so if you have that grounding, it's like it really makes it makes it a you can deal with the character assassinations. You can deal with it because and for me, I know when that's happening, I know who I am. I know that I don't have those bad thoughts that they would like to present I have. Uh,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
that's what's gotten me through it is like I just know who I am and I know what I believe, um and so it's, it still hurts. It still hurts to have people say unkind and untrue things,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, I can go to sleep knowing that that's not who I am. I know who I am.
Mhm. That's awesome. And to like, what a great grounding, because if you know, and everybody who knows you and loves you knows, um, your deepest wish is for everyone to be free. There's nothing to defend. There's nothing to justify.
Yeah, it's
You're
really
you're just
grounding.
hoping for the best for everyone in the world. Sincerely, truly, that's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, and how can that be wrong, right? So that's what keeps it so that I can get through those bad, hard moments, right?
Right. Wow, thank you. Thank you for that. And then also, like the other makes me think of the other parts of your title, um, how resilient communities are the antidote to fear, isolation, and anti-fascism.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to build on that? Like, I mean, just
Yeah.
listening to you, I could feel the isolation breaking.
You know, I really feel that the forces at work, um, against communities right now, all different kinds of communities and all different groups of people, whether it's immigrants or Arabs or LGBTQIA folks. It's I think the forces that are against marginalized communities and really just against our democracy and against our freedom, they want us to be feeling lonely. They want us to not be creating systems of resilience and support of one another. They advance in us sort of attacking one another or being divided in our movements. And that's, one thing that makes me very sad is when and I see it all the time, is movements sort of having internal rifts, which is essentially catering to exactly the groups that are against the movements working.
Dividing.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. Even prior to getting maybe into some of the most recent work I've been doing regarding, specifically fighting fascism and specifically fighting for collective liberation, I was working a lot in like food justice, and I was really interested and worried about sort of the breakdown of community and like the sort of hyper individualism of our society. And it was, I got very into mutual aid and the idea of like, and we've talked about this before on the show, but it's this idea of like when you're a kid and someone says, at least for me, when I was a kid, my mom would talk about people who don't have enough food, and I would be like, well, let's fix that. Like, why, and it didn't make sense to me that we could live in a world where there's abundance and yet there's scarcity for some, right? And so I always felt like people should just help each other, right? Like that's what we should be doing. And that's, I think we try to teach that, but we also teach this a lot of like individualistic thinking. And we sort of like very much celebrate the individual and the hero and the leader and that story, I think, is so ingrained in us, and I think it does a disservice to communal thinking and resilience because of creating connection with one another. And so I'm starting to see, and I was thought a lot about that in relation to food and how it was really hard to watch in a community that we had food insecurity amongst students at UC Davis, and yet we live in a town where there's just like plenty of food. So I got very into like mutual aid, but I've been thinking a lot about how that also relates to these like maybe less local, but like things around fascism and like things around breaking this current wave that we have of attacking our freedoms. And I think we saw this in Minnesota, right? We saw that the way they were able to fight back was be resilient and care for one another, right? There wasn't like an individualistic thinking there. There was a like, how do I help my neighbors? How do I make sure they're okay? And I think that's a huge threat to fascism.
That was beautiful. That is always beautiful.
Yeah, it's a huge threat to these systems of oppression if people in the numbers aren't willing to allow that. And they do it with their bodies and their minds and their voices, and they work with one another and they care for one another. And that's so powerful, and it's very scary to those in power who would prefer that we're disconnected and prefer that we're kind of broken because we lack connection with the communities around us.
And the threat from community is not any threat of violence at all towards authoritarian. It's it's not being controlled. Like the fear they must experience is like, well, we can't control them. What are we going to do?
Right. Right, we can't
Because
control them. There's a huge desire to control us, and there's so
yeah,
many ways that they're trying to control us, whether it's through social media, and having us just stuck on a screen, or having us separate, or creating rifts within movements. There's so many ways that they're trying to control us. And when communities say no to that and take care of one another, that's a threat.
yeah, it's incredible. I don't know. I just was flashing to members of the U.S. administration who are not actual leaders, but are trying to control everything. How important it is every time someone says anywhere the truth, or points out like, hey, what about morality? And like,
Mm.
you want to send our sons and daughters to war that's completely illegal and not justified, or just having that become like the normal, normalized, the truth normalized, because when you said screens, I think that's when it popped into my head. So
Yeah.
many faces, if you make the mistake of watching news like I do. So many clips of people trying to distort reality and pretend like there wasn't an insurrection.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
it's just, it can make you crazy unless you say the truth and you talk to other people and help each other remember the truth and validate the truth, and then laugh and celebrate what, this, the
Yeah.
reality of we can and do love each other.
Yeah.
Community is real.
Yeah, I mean, community is, I mean, it's so hard now to know what is real. I mean, that is an unfortunate thing that it stresses me out too, because we're all in echo chambers. Like, if you're on social media, if you're consuming news, you're probably in some sort of echo chamber. It's like very hard. I think it's important that people try to combat that, as much as they can, try to read across things. But
I do.
um, I think our corporate media is pretty much, sticking to mostly what the government wants us to believe. In most cases, I mean, I think some of them are getting better, but some are not. But it is your local, and being in your community is real, right?
Yeah, right.
And that's kind of something that we've sort of, in many people have severed that from themselves. They get in their car, they go to their house, they consume social media, they might play video games, they might just consume more media, and that's, I think, well, not healthy, but also very, again, like, really leaning into individualistic behavior, um, and doing exactly what they want. It's so much easier to be controlled if you're not connected with other people who might tell you a story about something different than what you're seeing on your screen.
Yeah, and how if we are react quickly, maybe we're not listening, and maybe it's okay to listen to a different story than the one we're used to, even
Exactly.
if and when we don't like it, just to keep breathing through it and just at least build a relationship, a rapport, um, decent, civil behavior, a connection.
Yeah.
And it's in connections grow if you listen, and it helps people say, okay, well, maybe you're okay, and I can talk to you again.
Yeah. Yeah, but also it sort of keeps you from getting so stuck in your echo chamber, right? Like,
Yeah.
which is hard. It's really hard. Um, but I think getting out into your community and talking to people helps a lot with that. And then it
Yeah.
builds that resilience, and then you've got stronger communities, and stronger communities are exactly what the, you know, fascist leaders at the top of many governments don't want.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I'm sorry, I wanna go back to the hard stuff again.
Yeah, go that's
We're
fine. There's a
we're
lot of
gonna
hard
come in
stuff to deal with right now,
there's a lot of
so
hard stuff. There's a Sometimes it's really hard to get up in the morning with and have
yeah,
faith.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
if I
stuff.
think too much about the distress, um, in the world, which there's so much. Um,
Yeah,
so to bring it back local to, like, local
yeah,
distress for
mhm,
a minute, I just went watching just I haven't I don't regularly attend at all, but, um, you know, the few times I've attended the Human Relations Commission,
mhm,
um, if I understand correctly, a big part of the job or is listening to people talk about hate crimes, like what's awful, what's happening, hate incidents, hurts. Um, that's a big role you all play. It's almost feel like you're absorbing the hurt
yeah,
for people to, you know, give them a listen and not argue and to take in their concern. And I just wanted to see what that's like.
mm,
Um, Anything you want to reflect on that role? And I know the commission does a lot more than that. But I don't know how do you do that? It seems really hard, and I'd have to go shake it off and do some yoga and exercise.
yeah.
um,
I do a
Fast.
lot of yoga, so that's actually part of part of my practice. Yeah, I think the Human Relations Commission, we that's one part of what we do is we
Hmm.
offer, an opportunity for people to speak their grievances, and in many times it's around, not either feeling that they have been treated well or something has happened to them in the community. In some cases, people come and just tell us their opinion on things. It's the same in many ways to what happens at city council meetings too. There are open opportunities for public comment. Um, you know, I think in many cases for people, it serves as an opportunity to just voice their thoughts.
Hmm.
And our job is not necessarily to agree with people or to validate or
Hmm.
to try to solve that problem that they bring forward. I mean, in some cases, if we hear enough of something, we might do so. But it wouldn't happen in the moment, right? What's
Right.
interesting about public comment, which I think is a very interesting just practice, and I've wondered a lot about whether that practice of public comment, where there is no response,
Hmm. It's true.
whether there's some value in that. I know there's something called council where people do something like this too, or it's like a circle where you sit in a circle and you can say a thing, but there is no response. Nobody's gonna like debate you. You're just saying what you think. And
Hmm.
there's some, I think, amount of healing in that for people, just to have what they want to say heard. Um, and I think there's something really valuable in there being not a back and forth. There isn't, no one's going to say what you said is wrong or respond to it, but you've been able to speak your mind. And I do think that there's value in that. And that is something that we offer. So people can come and speak their mind and say a thing. And it's not our job in that moment. And in fact, we are not supposed to respond. And it's the same
Right.
with the city council. If you come in for public comment, the city council members are not going to respond to you.
Hmm.
They will hear you, but there is value in being heard. And so I do think there's some really good value there. And then also, what the commission does do is we create subcommittees to work on particular things. And if we are hearing things, not necessarily only in public comment, but if we're hearing things in the community, we can bring forward that we want to work on something. And so, for example, this year we've worked a lot on immigrant safety and solidarity, and that was because we heard in the community that there is a lot of fear, and very valid fear, around the hostility of how our federal government is handling and treating immigrants in our community. And not only immigrants, people of color, anyone that might appear to be an immigrant, and what that's doing and how that's hurting our community. And so I've been on the subcommittee to work on that. And it's really, really the most powerful way I think we can do our work is through those subcommittees, because we can actually bring people in, hear what they have to say, and then make recommendations to our city council based on what we've heard. And that to me is, in addition to hearing people through public comment, that's the kind of work where we actually are able to move things forward and make recommendations to the city that might, in some cases, even result in things that are codified. So, for instance, we did push for a sanctuary city ordinance, not just a resolution, but an ordinance. And we were able to, through the work of the commission and then working with the city council, get that approved. And that's this sort of more concrete work. But that's not to say, that does come out of sometimes hearing in public comment lots of things, and lots of, and then subcommittees can form to sort of work on those things.
Can you remind us what's the difference between a resolution and ordinance? Is an ordinance something that can be enforced?
Yeah. A resolution is more of like a statement. It's kind of like a value statement by the city. An ordinance is actually kind of like a legal codified thing where it's actually meant to be followed, and should be followed because it's essentially in our kind of the city's code or law.
Okay, thank you. And that's and thanks for also like spelling out what else the commission does. Like,
Yeah, of course.
the work is behind the scenes, right?
Yeah,
in subcommittee meetings.
Yeah, and I didn't really answer your question on how do I handle those comments. I'm a very empathetic person, so which I think is important to have empathetic people in these roles. I think a lot of, sometimes the people that might be in those roles are the people that maybe don't feel a lot. I feel a lot. I have to be careful about showing my feelings because, I don't want anyone to think that, I'm choosing, to have more empathy toward anyone or another, right? There's that. Also, we're not really supposed to respond. And there's a lot that can happen if you start really being very emotional. So I do a lot of breathing exercises. I try to be really curious and try to understand where people are coming from. And I try to be a good listener, and I also try to look for patterns on things and see if there are things that, need to be brought up or not brought up later on. Cannot be done in that moment, of course. But yeah, I think it is hard. It is hard to be in that position. But I also think it serves a really important a really important purpose to just be a witness to people's thoughts, whether I agree with them or not. And that's something that, there are times where people come and say things that I don't agree with. And in some cases, they're attacking me. And even in those moments, I need to remain calm and listen.
Yeah. And you do a good job.
Thank you.
I'm thinking about, I don't know if you remember your speech. I know you make many speeches, but the one I'm referring to was the last No King speech.
Yeah.
in
Yep.
Sacramento, California. And I'm just wondering if, um, like, if you want to highlight, like, what are some of the things that you would say are, this is one way to look at it, are most meaningful to you, like in that context, like from that speech? Because it was a very powerful speech and you made a lot of points. And if I had a copy, I would be reading it out loud.
Yeah.
But what are some, what do you remember, or what do you remember that people really, what really resonated with folks?
Um, I think what resonated the most with people, I think there were a couple things. I'll mention three things that I think resonated. One, I think that resonated with people was an inviting in and a welcoming in to this movement.
Mm,
Um, I think I think sometimes people who've been working in movements can sometimes be like, well, where have you been all along? Like,
mm,
why are you so late? And then there's not a welcoming in. And that's like the opposite of how we're going to build a movement, right?
mm,
And so I think for some people, there was a lot of appreciation for the welcoming in and noting that some people have been doing this work for a long time. And some people are just joining in, or some people may have been thinking about this for a long time, but just like haven't taken the step, right?
mm-hmm,
Um, and that was sort of how I opened the speech, was really to try to sort of ground people in that fact that there are people at all different stages, um, but you're all welcome. And so I think that was a really important thing for me to do, was to welcome people. Um, I think the other thing was noting that you're not alone, right? Like that this is about um, seeing who your comrades are and seeing who the people in the movement are, and knowing that um, you hold a sense of care for them, right? And um, I think that was another important aspect. And then probably the one that I heard the most from people that was important to them was the sort of connecting the dots between struggles.
mm-hmm,
That these struggles really are um, very connected. Um, so some people are coming to this because they cannot stand what they've seen, what ICE is doing, right? Some people are coming to this because they are appalled at the war that we have started with Israel and Iran,
mm-hmm,
and what we're doing to Lebanon.
mm-hmm,
Some people are coming to this because they've been following and appalled at the genocide in Gaza, or the apartheid and abuses in the West Bank.
mm-hmm.
Some are coming to this because they're dissatisfied with capitalism, and they're dissatisfied with um, the treatment that they get, and the fact that their voices aren't being heard by our leaders in government, right? So like all of these things, they're all connected.
Yeah, I
And
remember.
yeah,
Go ahead.
they're all kind of connected to basically fascism, oligarchy, supremacy, and this squashing of the power of the people.
Mm. And right, yes, rights being taken away
Yeah.
one after, and the fact that we can't, it's really hard to pay bills. It is really hard to pay rent and buy groceries. And if you have to travel a lot, pay for gas and, insurance, it's, I mean, a lot of people are there also because it is unaffordable. It's really unaffordable.
This also
So,
comes down to class. I mean, it does come down to that. I mean, it comes down to the fact that we have a billionaire oligarchy. We
mhm,
have our taxes going to killing people. versus educating people
Without our
um,
consent.
without our consent. Um, but we also have to take some responsibility for the fact that
Oh,
who we voted in and what they
totally.
believe in and what they said they're going to do, and they're doing it. So, but we got to take that power back, and we've got to we cannot be silent, because I think as we're seeing, our ability to even speak will be taken away. It's just this very slippery slope. And we're lucky that we can do the No Kings rallies today and that we can say these things. But there are people that are being put or targeted because they're speaking out. And that's, we've already seen that. So that being said, there's still room for us to speak, and we need to do it now before those rights really, really are completely taken away from us.
To prevent those from all being completely taken away from us.
Right. I mean, if we stay silent, then
Yeah,
then we guarantee it.
that's 100%. And I remember a long time ago thinking, oh, how can like, like a pebble in a pond and the ripple, like how can like one little pebble in a pond and its, little few circles of ripples have any impact? Well, the more of us who are throwing pebbles in the pond, the more ripples there are, and the more the ripples are touching. It's just like actually logical. I used to think, I can't take that leap of faith. I was
Mhm.
too, I don't know, scared or jaded to believe that we really have the power, that the people really have the
Mhm.
power. And then as more and more people are able to break out of isolation, uh, take more courageous steps with support, um, the more ripples there are, the more you see is actually, it's like, wow, oh, it can
It's
happen.
possible. It is
It's a
possible.
it's a level of reality that we can co-create and keep co-creating.
100%. I have to believe it, and I really do believe that it is possible. I think it is like, what you said, but the pebble, that ripple touches another and another and another and another and another, and it spreads. And I think that I don't know if it's indivisible. I think it's the indivisible folks talk a lot about the 3.5%. Like, if you can get 3.5% to stand up to um, fascism or an
Authoritarian
autocratic
government.
government, then you can actually, an authoritarian government, excuse me, then you can actually have the impact of, overthrowing it and moving it towards something else. And I think, I can't remember, I don't think that they weren't at the 3.5% with this No Kings, but they're getting closer, the numbers of people. Now, my feeling on the No Kings is I think it's a way of bringing people in. I don't think it's the answer necessarily to the problem. I think it's a way of bringing people in and showing them that there is a community that thinks the way they do and is opposed to what's happening, and that they won't be alone.
Mhm.
And so I think it's an inviting in method. I think that's what it is.
Mhm.
It's kind of an
Mhm.
initiation in some ways into
Mhm.
this, like, let's stand up against um, this authoritarian government. What I think has to come next, though, is most likely more like things that will hurt financially. So general strikes. And I think they have to last longer than a day, is my guess. And I do think that that's where things hurt governments, is when they start to see um, that the people are actually willing to lose something and put pressure in a way that they actually feel it, because money unfortunately talks. So I actually have noticed that a lot of those that were organizing, I think May 1 is going to be a
Mhm.
strike Day. So I think there's been a lot of the people that were involved in No Kings are pushing for that, and I think those are the next steps.
Mm-hmm. And I want to just add to what you said about No Kings being an invitation. I think it's bringing us together also with people who are not necessarily all like-minded, but with people who found common ground.
Yes,
And this time,
that's very true.
with a lot of differences, and that's one thing that makes it even more exciting to me, to be staying there with people who like we don't agree on everything. It doesn't
No.
matter. We found common ground. And
Yeah.
we don't want to lose our rights, and we want to be able to pay our bills, and we want to stop. We want the rest of the world to know we don't want to kill people. And we see other countries are decimated, and many of us are connected to those other countries. So that's one thing that's thrilling about it to me, is like we're like letting go of differences that are not fundamental, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that I feel we kind of miss in a lot of movements, is this like inability to have nuance and have differing opinions within it. And that's why and again, that's exactly what they would like, is for us to fall apart because we can't agree on the fine print, right? And I think in this case, we really need to be able to have have a common goal and not necessarily agree on every detail.
Well, Deema, we have 3 minutes.
Whoa,
Do you want to
that was so
think of?
fast.
Oh my gosh, I love this conversation. Do you want to give just a closing thoughts before we need to wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of what we talked about was, resilience and not allowing for division. And so if there's one thing I'd say to anybody who is listening, who maybe you're one of those people who has been afraid, um, or is maybe feeling like the silence is getting to be too much. I do believe that you will find community on the other side of your fear. And I know for me personally, I am a much healthier and more connected person after taking that very scary leap into saying what I believe. So I hope people find some strength in that and give it a go. And free themselves from, a lot of the pressure to just be quiet.
Wow, thanks for the encouragement and for the concept of we will save us in
We will.
resilient communities. Yeah, the
It's the only
antidote to fear, isolation, and fascism. Deema Tamini, I'm so grateful you were here today. Thank you so much for all your work and for your presence for this conversation. I look forward to more. And I want to
Likewise.
thank our viewers and listeners for tuning in. Tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time to Talk4TV or W4CY.com. Thank you, Rebel, our engineer. Thank you, Dean K. Piper, our producer. And may we all continue to have enriching conversations in diversity. Thanks again. Thanks.